So thank you all for coming to hear me talk today. As Professor Curry said, we met in December, and I actually went on a bit of a rant, and we had a discussion based around why women weren't making it into senior positions in academia, despite all the policies and positive changes that academic institutions have made. And I feel that policies are absolutely essential, but there can be a disconnect between some of those opportunities that those policies afford being realised, and often those barriers may actually be down to leadership or their lack of. So my talk today is really going to be focused not on policies, but on leadership, and how better leadership could perhaps create a better working environment for us as researchers to thrive, as well as our research to thrive. I hope that by telling you my very ordinary army story, that I'll be able to demonstrate the importance of leadership and leadership training, and how that can contribute to creating a more positive working environment. I'm sharing my views, my experiences. They're all very much my own opinions, and I definitely don't claim to have all the answers. In fact, I don't have any answers for any of this, really. I just feel I'm very fortunate in my experiences. I've been able to travel the world. I've met lots of different types of people. I've led different people in different situations, and it means that I feel that I'm probably a little bit better equipped than my peers to navigate a career in academia. And what one of my friends quite calls it as it's an academic black box that no one's really sure what direction we're moving in. So hopefully you'll enjoy my talk, and that the themes throughout my talk are relevant to you regardless of your sex, your gender, your age. It's not purely about women, it's about everybody at any stage of your career. So, if I'm going to talk about leadership, I thought it would be very useful to start with a definition of what leadership is. However, there isn't a single definition of leadership, and it is so powerful, yet often so intangible. We all probably know or can describe what we think a good leader is or what a bad leader is, but actually encapsulating it in one definition is really difficult. And I've put up a description here that is extremely wordy, I apologise, but I think it describes a transformational model of leadership. And it's one that the army uses, and I think it's one that actually relates quite nicely to academia too. It's that a leader will identify a problem that requires solving or a need for change. They'll then galvanise a group of people together, develop them, train them, equip them to be able to solve that problem or to instigate a change. I think it's also quite important at the beginning of this talk to also differentiate between leadership and management. The two do go hand in hand, but management is processes. Management is doing something on time. It's creating the timetable. It's ordering materials or resources for a specific experiment. It's perhaps marking an exam paper and getting it back to the student on time. But leadership is the effort that you put into that and the impact that it will then have on that student, whether good or bad. So I started my army career at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, in a very snowy January 2009. I started with 33 other young women, and we formed 11 platoon, which was our little section, and we were most commonly referred to as the girls' platoon. And some people will probably find that a little bit derogatory now, but we were known as the girls' platoon. Things have changed a little bit now. Girls are mixed with men and they train together, whereas we did a lot of our training separate to the men. But we were selected based upon our leadership potential. But despite that, women still only make up 10% of intakes at Sandhurst. And when we first started, we were very much a disorganised bunch. We had come from very different walks of life. Most of us were graduates, very few had a science degree. And the course taught us everything that we sort of needed to know about the army. The tactics and doctrine of warfare, how to fight, and I'll say inverted commas, but how to fight. We had an ethos of train hard and fight easy, but we also had many academic lessons so we could better understand the environment and the context in which we were working. So we had war studies, we had behavioural and communication sciences, as well as defence and international affairs. And this was to equip us with the other side of the skills that are required as an officer to fully understand the legalities of war fighting, but also the psychology of persuasion and negotiation. The course is a year long. It was extremely demanding, like both physically and mentally demanding. It was exhausting most of the time. In retrospect, I think most of us look back with fond memories, but it was horrendous. But we also really quickly learnt that to survive and to succeed, we had to work as a team. We had to work extremely hard for ourselves and for one another, and only then would we be successful. So the first myth, though, that I want to bust is that as this group of women, I started with 33, we lost 24 along the way, and 10 of our original group actually commissioned altogether. I commissioned with only 14, so our numbers of success were low. We knew that we were joining a very male-dominated environment and that we would have a lifetime perhaps, or we felt that we may have a lifetime of sort of challenging misogynistic and antiquated views. But the first myth is that actually the army itself isn't antiquated in its views about women. It does afford women many opportunities, and now very equal opportunities. But the people within it also don't hold those views. But a lot of those views are held by people outside of the military. We call them armchair warriors, people that don't really know or understand, and don't understand also that our military has moved on in the way that perhaps it was once perceived, and that the army no longer, I suppose, looks like the stereotype that people perhaps hold in their minds. That being said, I do think we felt that the odds were stacked against us and that we would have to outperform our male colleagues to be treated as equal. And also we just wanted to be the best that we could be so that we would pave the way for like future women, so that you can never say, someone will never say, I once worked with that woman and she was rubbish at her job in the army, and therefore that tarnishes the reputation of all women behind us. And we really felt, I think most of us really felt, strong responsibility to proving our worth. So the Sandhurst motto is serve to lead. It is completely what we embody. And serve to lead means that we will do anything for anyone in our team. We will always put the safety, the well-being, the comfort of the people of our team ahead of our own. And it was really important that we learnt to engender that. Sandhurst didn't only equip us with how to conduct combat operations, but a large part of our training was about learning the leadership code. The Army love a mnemonic, so leaders in red down the side, and you can read what the leadership code is, and I think most will agree that this very much fits within any organisation. And then also the values and standards of the British Army. That's our moral code, it's what binds us, it's more than just words on a page. It is completely what we stand for and what sets us apart. So I suppose I'm sounding maybe a bit like a Sandhurst perspective at the moment, but what did Sandhurst really teach me? I think the first thing it taught me was how to lead myself, how to approach problems with a determined, motivated, and drive, not to give up, to choose the hard right over the easy wrong, and to know that I can lead by example, so I had a sort of self-belief. It also taught me the true value of a great team. I was so fortunate in the girls that I was in a platoon with that we became the best of friends, and 10 years on we are still the best of friends. We're in communication all the time. WhatsApp really helps to keep people in communication all the time. But I have a very invaluable support network. But it also gave me self-awareness, and I think this is something that's really important for leaders, anybody who finds themselves in a position of responsibility or influence over people, is understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, being able to appraise your own performance, And when you're faced with really difficult challenges and when you're really stressed, knowing how you may behave and how to sort of maybe rein in some of those more negative behaviours so you can continue to have a positive impact on others. So after a year at Sandhurst, I commissioned into the Corps of Royal Engineers. And then I qualified as a bomb disposal officer. And then I had to do another course that taught me how to be a Royal Engineers officer. And that was just learning how to project manage some of the tasks that a typical Royal Engineer unit may be asked to do. So that would be like bridging or demolitions, water supply, maybe force protection. And so after nearly 2 years, it was when I got my first job. It was very exciting. And that was at the end of 2010. I became 2-troop commander of 2-troop 2-1 Field Squadron. And a troop, for those who don't know about military, it's just a small unit. It's commanded by a junior officer, and they're vary on size, but the average size is maybe about 30 soldiers within a troop. And you become immediately responsible for them, and if you're unlucky, maybe a few £1 million worth of equipment as well. And nothing prepares you for real-life soldiers. And I'm sure there's probably lots of teachers in here that can relate to getting students and being not ill-prepared for students and how students will surprise you. So I felt that the only appropriate photo was a picture of Baldric from Blackadder to say that soldiers will always surprise you in a good way and in bad ways. But it is good fun. And the role of a troop commander is extremely varied, though. You have the responsibility of everything to do with those people. So their career management, their welfare, for discipline, and to command and lead them on operations. I had a very busy time in the UK prior to a culminating tour in Afghanistan. And the most important thing, though, about being a troop commander is really getting to know your people. Absolutely knowing them, getting to know them then allows you to understand fully what drives them, what their motivations are, to know and be able to identify each individual's strengths and weaknesses and know how to best to employ them within the team. Only then can you have a cohesive team, and only then will you be able to really tackle the challenges that are put before you. In the Army, people are the centre of everything that we do. And I don't think that's different to many other organisations. But we really do focus a lot on understanding the leadership and the leadership models that we employ and when we employ them. And leadership is very situational. For the most part, though, our leadership style is very servient and transformational. It's very much centred around people and what people need and what those needs are to achieve greater things. And this brings me on to my next myth. Lots of people think that the Army is an organisation where people are just autocratic and authoritative, and they just shout at each other to make things happen, just do this and do this now. And there is a place for that, and there often is a place for that in military situations. But unless you use different types of leadership, like the servient and transformational models, only then would you have success using those more direct methods, because you'll have built trust and loyalty between your people, and then they will listen to you and do as you say in those times where it is really required. Leading men and women on operations is extremely challenging, and it was a very daunting responsibility, but one that I did relish. It was what I'd been trained to do, and I'd looked forward to deploying to Afghanistan. I deployed in 2012, and our role was to operate in very small teams, and it was to find and remove the threat of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, and we worked in support of the Afghan National Security Forces. Things don't always go to plan, and halfway through my tour doing that job, I then had a job change. I was asked to start leading a group of Brits and supporting some senior Afghan commanders on how they could learn to develop their own capability to counter the threat of IEDs. I got the job because I was the most qualified person for the job at the time. And I think there was a lot of nervousness, particularly on the British side, of putting a woman in that job, working so closely to Afghan commanders. I don't know of anyone else that kind of did something similar. We had women in engagement teams, but we don't think we had women that had done this particular role. And the Afghans obviously have a very different culture to us, and they certainly don't have women in senior positions, let alone women in the military, let alone in senior positions in their military. So there were concerns as to how I would fare and how I would cross the cultural barrier. Unfortunately, there wasn't a problem at all. I think I crossed the cultural barrier just through having open dialogue, treating the commanders with the same respect as anybody else would expect to be treated with. I had witnessed some Brits and Americans treating them sometimes with a bit of like a slightly patronising tone, maybe slightly derogatory, or this is the way you must do it, which doesn't matter if you don't speak the language, you can always pick up on what the tone is. So I think we actually achieved some successes just due to fostering a much more healthy and equal relationship. And so we could really work together to overcome the challenges that they faced. So my third myth is that people are employed in roles based upon their ability, irrespective of gender. So I've been working, delivering training and helping build capability within different forces around the world who are currently tackling Islamic terrorist groups, both in the army and as a consultant. I've worked in the Middle East, Afghanistan and Africa to deliver training, and it certainly changes your perspective of what works and what doesn't work when it comes to leadership. And in these situations, you really must have like a much more adaptive approach. And as an example of this, I'll give Nigeria. I developed and delivered the first counter-improvised explosive device training to the Nigerian army engineers. The Nigerian army was starting to sustain very high casualties in the northeast of their country, where they were fighting an insurgency from Boko Haram. The soldiers themselves described being posted to the northeast as a death sentence, and they had lost confidence. The soldiers were quite poorly paid. They had to work in very challenging environments with very limited resources. Spending time getting to know them was really rewarding, but it was actually critical to being able to really train them to do their job. Spending time training with them, though, allowed me to overcome some of their barriers, actually showing them an example and being able to explain and demonstrate what good actually looked like and that it was attainable to them was really important. And in this situation, I didn't need to just equip them with a new skill set, though. We also had to inspire confidence. And so that was extremely challenging. So the army has led the way, or has tried to lead the way, I should say, with policies relating to improving equality, diversity, and inclusion for many years. I am not suggesting that they have nailed it. Like any large organisation, they are just making tracks to move in a positive direction. I think a really big step came last year, though, when they opened all roles within the military to women. I think that was really an end to what was sort of blatant misogyny hidden behind a few weak arguments, and I'm glad that that debate is now over. In the army, all personnel are promoted based upon their performance, their capability and their potential. We have a very structured and rigorous appraisal process, and everybody within the army will receive a report every year. And just change that. And everybody also knows what they need to do to be eligible for promotion and when they need to do it. They also know when their report will go to a board and when a board will sit to promote them. And I think there's a very clear, structured pathway that I'm not really sure what the pathway, when I compare it to academia, I'm not sure that our pathways are as structured, are as clear, and whether people do get promoted on the basis of their performance, ability, potential. The problem that the army have in comparison to academia is that very few women join. In academia and higher education, at least 50% are women. And so the situations for the army and for academia in that sense are very different. And I know that I'm now starting to sound like a bit of an army recruitment advert, and I don't want to be. And also that if the army is so brilliant, why am I here? But when I was in Afghanistan, I just started to consider what my future was going to be and what I wanted my future to be. I had loved my degree. I really enjoyed science. And that's what I wanted to pursue. So I needed to leave the army and come back to academia. And for a very new and different challenge. But my journey so far hasn't always been easy. It's been a difficult transition at times. And I really do believe, though, that the army leadership approaches is something that academia could really learn from. And so I've spoken a lot about the army, and I've not done a lot to say, how does it relate to us here at the college? But I would say that actually the army and an academic institution are very similar. Both large organisations, both historical institutions, very hierarchical. They're made up of lots of small units that do very different things, but then they come together. And both have a remit of tackling some of our greatest challenges. Both are hugely dependent on its people doing great things and doing great things around the world, crossing cultural divides and barriers. As we all know, academic life can be quite tough, very tough. It's very demanding. And I think it's quite similar to the army in that sense, that for some people it's more than a career, it's actually a lifestyle. And not everyone wants to sign up to that, but for many that is what it becomes, and it becomes who we are, not just what we do. But based on my observations and experiences so far, there is one stark difference, and that is leadership training. The skills that we learn during a PhD, I'm at a PhD stage at the moment, but also what I believe other people will not have learnt as postdocs, or don't really equip them for the next levels. They don't equip them to be research group leaders. There's very little opportunity to learn how to manage personnel, to learn how to manage a budget, to write grants, to teach, to learn how to teach well, to coach, to mentor, to really lead. And in academia as well, people are promoted on their sort of academic credentials, which don't actually relate to the skills that they are most likely to employ once they are promoted. If they promote into a research group leader position, you actually need good leaders and good managers. And then when you put it into this context, it's no wonder that people, once they promote into those positions, really struggle, because they haven't actually been adequately prepared for the job that they're being asked to do. They may be great scientists, but if they don't have those other skills that they actually need to employ more regularly on a daily basis, then it's going to become hard. And that's when things start to unravel and can have a really negative impact. So another reason I've really focused predominantly on people and how better leadership can improve how people feel about their working environment. But another reason I think why we need to improve leadership is for research and our research excellence. We need to conduct our research with rigour. Our research, we need to know that it is honest, that it is reproducible, that it's interpretable, that perhaps it's open and transparent. My research at the moment is focused on systematic reviews and meta-analysis of animal studies. I'm looking at gaining empirical evidence to make evidence-based decisions to inform future research agendas. It may come as a surprise to some people, but it is shocking the amount of research that isn't done to the rigour that we would expect. Just good laboratory practice, good reporting. We're just not seeing it. And so there is a real need to change our culture. And I think really that's what it is. It's just over time, sort of some bad practices have become ingrained, and we're all a product of this system, and I know there's a perverse culture of needing, high impact, novel, really exciting stories to tell, and research isn't that a lot of the time. So we really need to tackle, I suppose, what's been called in the biomedical domain, the reproducibility crisis. And essentially, it's morally incumbent upon us to look at the validity of our research. It would be unethical not to. And then the second thing about research excellence is if we invest more in our people, we give them, our teams, better capacity, better capability, we try to work more in collaboration, we foster stronger, more successful collaborations, then we as a community will achieve more in our research, and we will become greater than the sum of our parts. So young women scientists leave academia or leave an academic career in far greater numbers than men. But I think there are a number of reasons why an academic career may not seem so attractive. This could be due to just the competition that exists, the solitary nature of the work, the fact that it can be all-encompassing, but also for both sexes, both men and women, the constant hunt for research funding and the lack of job security when you're in your early career stages can also be a real impediment. I've focused on what the Army do best, which is leadership training. And I really believe that by delivering leadership training at every career stage in their pathway, we can ensure that people are better equipped and prepared for the job that they need to do. And I appreciate that leadership will come naturally to some people. So some people are just very gifted, which is great. But for more mere mortals, average people like myself, leadership is something that I've had to practice, and it's taken commitment and time. But I think it's so important that the basic principles are engendered and taught at an early career stage, whether that's at private soldier or undergraduate student. And then throughout those careers, those principles have to be revisited, retrained, reinforced, but in the changing context of their job and what their job is asking of these people. So I think only then, as a university, we'll be able to attract the best and the brightest. And we'll have a lot more credibility at saying that we are a home to high quality, highly valuable, creative, innovative research. And so I'll leave you with this quote that, thankfully, John gave to me yesterday, which just is that I don't think we're as far apart from the Army as we think, and there are a lot of lessons that could be learned from the Army and other areas of industry are doing leadership well as well. But it's something that I don't think we should pay lip service to anymore, and our people and our research would benefit from it. Thank you for listening to me. I hope it wasn't too much of a rant, and I would now like to open up to you guys for comment, discussion, and questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nadia, for a great talk by a fighting woman and a thinking woman. Questions? You just take the microphone. Sorry, if you could use the microphone.
Richard Green, actually head of department in the business school and an economist. I think you implied that promotion in the Army takes place sort of, you discover that came out wrong, but other people decide you've been promoted without actually an application, whereas academia, it's very much the individual applies to be promoted. Did I get that?
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so you're drawing a conveyor belt almost, if you like, and you have to meet not everyone will promote all the way through, but there is a pipeline and you get pulled through it. And if you meet certain criteria, you become eligible for promotion, and then you will automatically go to a board and be promoted if you meet those criteria. Yeah, it is quite different in that sense.
Although I think we would regard good practice in any department as showing the leadership to actually identify and encourage people who are ready to apply for promotion to do so. So we're moving in that direction at least. Hang on.
It's an individual. You have to initiate your promotion process as an individual in academia. That tends to be the way. It's not somebody saying you've hit these milestones, go ahead. You then have to initiate and then fill in a crazy form, which you don't have to do. You know, the board is very different to the form.
Question at the back.
Thanks for a very interesting talk. I agree very much with what you said about the lack of leadership training in academia. And one thing that has always puzzled me is, do you have any guess as to why that is the case? It seems so obvious that it's lacking, and I've always wondered why other institutions have figured that out and academia has sort of not. I don't know.
I don't know exactly why, and I haven't spent enough time within an academic institution to speak with any authority. But maybe it's just that we have, over time, just focused on our outputs more, on doing great science or doing great research or being a good academic, and not actually appreciating the importance of some of those other skill sets, those softer skills that actually can really bring out the best in people. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on why that is. I think also there are still good leaders within academic institutions, but it's not as a product necessarily of the environment in which they've grown up in. It's just they are themselves interested in being the best leaders that they can be.
Medina.
Hi, thanks for a great talk. I was wondering if you had any opinions on people who are seen as great scientists, but then actually have been shown to be kind of not so good leaders, or the issues surrounding their leaders and the way they kind of conduct themselves around their colleagues or their students.
Yeah, I do have some opinions. I think it's so difficult because they're two very different skills that we're asking for. To be a very good scientist is very different to being a very good leader, and it won't necessarily come together. But I think what I worry about, I suppose, is that there are lots of good scientists that find themselves in positions of responsibility, having influence, and they actually haven't been equipped at all. So they're actually worse than, they could be better than what they are, potentially. And I don't know if there could be a different career stream, whereas those scientists who don't feel that they are strong enough to be good research group leaders could still have a role to play at a senior level but not be a leader, or they change their leadership style. I think at the moment, I'm not explaining this very articulately, the pathway is they become a research group leader. I don't know if there could be an alternative path whereby somebody who doesn't want to be a leader can still be on an equal setting to that person. I'm not sure if that exists. But what we must do at the moment is, why we are on this linear path, is actually equip those people, and perhaps the people that are going to struggle the most, with the basic skill set to try and help them, and also so that they can help the people that end up working under them as well. Because I certainly, as a PhD student, I'm fortunate in who my supervisors are, but I didn't choose them as such. Yes, I applied, but I didn't know what they were going to be like as leaders, and so the impact can be really negative on those who don't deserve for it to be. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question.
Louise and then Dorian. Sorry.
Hi, thanks. My name's Louise Lindsay. I'm the Director of HR here, so I'm really interested in your talk, and a lot of it resonates with the sorts of things that keep me awake at night as well. And I was wondering, we've got an Imperial College accredited management, accredited leadership and development program, which is great. It's modules you take over 2 years, leadership as coach, negotiating, managing difficult situations, project management, all those things. So that program is available, and I wonder why people don't, it's accessed by a number of different people, but quite a lot of professional services and not necessarily academic and research, and I wonder why that is. And reflecting on your presentation, I wondered whether you and your colleagues took a decision when you went to Sandhurst, which was a career that you knew would involve leadership and management, and therefore you signed up to the training as well as all the other aspects, the professional aspects that you need to be a bomb disposable expert. And I wonder whether actually people who come into academia sign up to do research and education and societal engagement, but not leadership, and it's getting that balance in terms of it's actually all of them have to come together, or because even if as you go into higher roles, you can decide whether you want to be a head of department or not, or you can be a specialist, but you will always have a core team of researchers working for you. So this isn't discretionary, but it was my sense right that you're in the army career. The difference is that people who go in to do those positions actually go on the basis that they are going to be a leader, which isn't the case in academia.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. People join to go to Sandhurst to become officers, to be leaders. We are choosing and saying that we want to do that career, that we want that responsibility, and that we take leadership seriously. But I think a lot of what you're saying also really resonates, and something I perhaps didn't touch on that much in the talk, is that there are actually still quite a lot of resources available to develop people. But I think what happens in academia is that it's on a self-selection basis. And if people don't know that they need to address their leadership or poor leadership, then they won't self-select to go on those courses. It's only people who are interested, someone like me, that is the person that goes to the teaching course, because I know that there's so much, it's so complicated. I'm not complacent enough to think I can do it, and I understand that I'm not fully equipped with all the skills that I need, and there's lots more help that I could gain. So it's about making people realise that it's not necessarily in their natural ability or in their gift to be good leaders, and that other aspects of their work could suffer if they don't engage with some of it in a more professional manner.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I was wondering if you could just elaborate maybe a little bit more on perhaps a personal experience in which you've needed to adapt your leadership style to a given scenario, how you identified what style would be better, and how you attempted to change your behavior to adapt to that situation.
Yeah, I think there's kind of I've got a lot of examples of it. I was trying to think of ones that will really are easy to relate to. I think I spoke in the slide about training others, and used a Nigeria example of having an adaptive form of leadership. And by an adaptive form, I mean that you need to adapt to the people that you're working with. And another example of that is just having an insubordinate soldier. I had a soldier who just wasn't engaging with anything that we were doing in a professional manner, would continually turn up late, would be disruptive during lessons on training, would almost like a naughty school child, basically, that most people would recognise. And my first thing was to go down a hard discipline road of that's not acceptable behaviour, that's not how we do things, but actually quickly came to realise that it meant that firstly it didn't work because behaviour continued as it was, but also it left me little room to manoeuvre. Once you've gone down a hard discipline road, you can't then kind of increase the punishment, if you like, if you're at the top end of the punishment already. So actually what I had to do is bring him into the fold, spend a lot more time getting to know him better and encouraging him in different ways to engage with the training that we were doing, so his behaviour improved. I don't know if that is an example that you were maybe looking for. Yeah, I think you always have to be reflective and look and question whether the techniques that you're using work or not. And when you have somebody that's failing in front of you, you then have to look at yourself and think, what could I be doing to improve this situation? Is it just that person, or could I do something differently?
Any naughty children in your group, Dorian?
Is there a scenario that you like face that I may have faced also that I could describe?
No, I just think personal stories are always interesting
Yeah.
to hear, and then everyone can adapt them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to know your advice for people who are potentially joining the military, and also what keeps you motivated to continually pursue this career.
So advice for people joining the military: do your homework, really understand what it is that you would want to do within the military. Visit as many places as you can within the military. So we've got three arms: the Navy, Air Force, and the Army. They all offer very different careers. And then if it's what you want to do, go for it. I think I've had an amazing career. It offered me great opportunities. It's not for everybody, but if you are interested, go and do your homework, go and visit them. And if it's something that inspires you, then do it, because it is hugely rewarding. And then what motivates me in my work now is that, as explained to Professor Curry earlier, I'm doing systematic reviews and meta-analysis. My day-to-day is pretty boring. I sit at a computer extracting data from research that's already been conducted. But what I do like about it is the disruptive nature of it, and that we're trying to get the empirical evidence together to really change the way in which we do research. I'm trying to answer pain-related questions, and many of you know that pain research is very challenging. We haven't had very much success in translating from animal models into the clinic. We haven't had very many new painkillers for a very long time, and there are very many chronic pain conditions for which we don't have effective treatments. So my motivations by doing the kind of work that I'm doing is that hopefully I'll be able to give the field a little bit of a kick and a nudge, and we can improve our practices that will eventually lead to better outcomes for patients that suffer with pain.
John?
So the model you're proposing works quite well at an individual group level. How, where people are kind of pulling in a similar direction, but if you then line up 6 groups in a department and they're all doing 6 different things, how do you apply that? And they all want to be individuals. How can you start applying a kind of the sort of slightly hierarchical leadership model of the army to a very flat structure in academia?
Yeah. Is the structure in academia very flat? I know it's like a question back at you, but I don't know that it is that flat. And I actually think that they both look very hierarchical. But that being said, I think that everybody has their role within the team, and if everyone is equipped with sort of the basic leadership principles, then that would make the team stronger and better anyway. So if those teams need to come and work together, those different groups need to come together, then you will need one person that becomes the leader of all those groups, that provides a direction for those groups to work towards. But every individual within those groups are equipped with the skill sets that they require. Am I?
I mean, you're right in that there are lots of people who are at that group leader level, but some of them are lecturers, some of them are senior lecturers, some of them are readers, some of them are professors. So there is a lot of hierarchy within the institution. But I guess one of the differences in academia is, what is the goal of any one department, and is there a mission that all the research groups buy into? I think the answers to that will vary from department to department.
And also I think it's about individuals being valued and being valuable, and allowing, it doesn't matter what level that position that individual holds, but allowing them still to contribute in a worthwhile way. And I think the army still does that, even though it's very hierarchical.
My name's Ashley Pollard. I don't work for Imperial. I'm a former NHS cognitive behavioural therapist, so I'm going to come at this from a psychological perspective. I'm going to throw you a bone. In my observation of the military, is that they are just like the academia. You have different departments. So you have a company combat team, which will have engineers. It will have intel weenies, as they call themselves. It will have the grunts who actually do you have the artillery. They all have different things that they want to do, and they all come together and choose a leader, brigadier, major, whatever, who then does the bits. And I think the same thing applies in academia, that it is just a matter of reframing the things. The hierarchy does exist. You only have to look at Weber's theory of bureaucracies and hierarchies to see that these things do translate. We just have different names, and the names obscure the functions that exist within the behaviours that have to be engaged in. That's all. It's not really a question, it's more support
it's
for your
a good
position.
comment, yeah. I think what I try to do is map the army against academia, and I don't think they have to exactly transpose onto one another. It's more just some of the themes and ideas that we employ in the army could perhaps be better employed in academia too.
Any further questions? Oh, right at the back. This is good for my step count.
Hello. Okay. My question's about can you just tell us a bit more about the greatest challenges you faced in the military versus in academia?
Yeah. Okay. I've got lots of very great challenges that I faced in the military. I think one of the greatest challenges, and it's actually related to academia, or being a scholar, if you like, or a thinking person, was describing to my soldiers why we were in Afghanistan, and what our remit really was. Obviously, we had a mandate that the government had signed us up to, but people were scared, and a lot of soldiers, particularly when I went, had sort of taken on a very Daily Mail, Sun tabloid view of Afghanistan, which wasn't very helpful. And it's very difficult to try and distill a very complex reason as to why we were in Afghanistan into a few sentences that a soldier can relate to and employ and still feel happy doing the job that they're doing. I still don't think I fully understand why we're in Afghanistan. I think people will be debating for many years to come why we were going to Afghanistan, but to ask a soldier to go to Afghanistan, they need to understand why. And that is one of the hardest things to do and describe why. So that was one of the challenges. I've had many physical challenges, but those can always be overcome with more training. And then challenges in academia. The greatest challenge, I think, has been a cultural one. I had left the army as a senior captain, and I realised, coming back to academia, is that sometimes students get treated really horribly. And it's surprised me, and I think because when you grow up going to school and you go to university, you don't know any different. But I was spoken to like I was dirt, and I was so shocked because I hadn't been spoken to in that way for such a long time. And I found that obviously people judge you based on how you present yourself. Like, I just look like a normal girl. I look younger maybe than I am. So they just assume that, one, you're maybe a little bit stupid or haven't worked out the ways of the world, and that is just terrible. So I found culturally it was very difficult to kind of bite my tongue, remember that I was in a different organisation, trying to start again. It isn't like that all the time, but there are just quite a few moments really at the beginning when I first went back to King's and started on a master's course where I could not believe how people were treated, or how students were treated. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. This one here, tentative.
I say it's been a brilliant session, so thank you. One possible thought about why universities don't do formal leadership. In all of the non-STEM subjects, we don't have research groups as such. You have the teacher-apprentice model for PhDs, and then it's a hierarchy because people have got different job titles, but they're all basically doing the same sort of thing, apart from the one who's head of department. And the head of department is normally doing it for 3 years and then going back to not doing it. And so leadership tends to be very temporary, and possibly that is a reason why people think they don't need to prepare for it, and they've seen other people doing it at different ways, and if X can do it, then, and so there may be something there.
I think the structural element is really interesting, and I think if it's organised in such a way, perhaps more in the humanities and outside of the sciences, maybe then what is required is that when people go into that job, there is some training that is specific to that job role that they can do. And it doesn't have to be really onerous. The idea that leadership is temporary is a concept that I don't quite like, because I think leadership isn't temporary. It should be about who we are. It should be something that we embody. It should be something that we can always strive to improve. But of course, I've gone to Sandhurst, and that's what I've been taught, and what I've been taught to believe is, but I'm probably really brainwashed, and I think it's really important. But I think that structure is one thing, but leadership can be something outside of the structure. We don't have to depend on structure to do the leadership part. And I think leadership needs to happen at all levels for everyone and specific to their role, is my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.